There is a man sitting across from the most beautiful woman he has ever seen. He has rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. He knows what to say. He knows how to smile. He bought the right shirt. He chose the right restaurant. He is doing everything perfectly. And yet, she is bored. Her eyes drift to her phone. Her answers shrink to one word. Her body angles toward the door, like a compass pointing home. By the end of the night, she will thank him politely, say she had a great time, and never respond to his next message. He will spend the following 3 days analyzing every word he said, every joke he made, every silence that lasted a second too long. He will wonder what went wrong. He will blame himself. He will try harder next time, and next time, the exact same thing will happen. Now, at that same restaurant, at a table not far away, there is another man. He did not rehearse anything. He is not trying to impress the woman sitting across from him. In fact, for the first 20 minutes, he barely spoke about himself at all. He asked questions, not eager, desperate questions, but slow, deliberate ones. He listened, not to respond, but to understand. When she said something funny, he did not explode into laughter. He smiled, just barely, enough to acknowledge her, not enough to worship her. When she tested him, and she did, because that is what women do with men they are evaluating, he did not buckle. He held his ground with a calm that was almost unsettling. He did not agree with everything she said. He did not apologize for his opinions. He was warm, but unreachable, present, but somehow still a mystery. By the end of that night, she was the one leaning in. She was the one extending the evening. She was the one who, 3 days later, texted him first. 2 men, same restaurant, same night. Radically different outcomes. And the difference between them had nothing to do with looks, money, status, or luck. The difference was knowledge. One man understood something about women and attraction that the other did not. One man had been given the real map. The other was still wandering in the dark with a compass that pointed in every wrong direction. That knowledge has a name. It was written 500 years ago by a man the world called a devil. Not because he was evil, but because he refused to lie about how power works. His name was Machiavelli, and what he understood about human nature, about influence, about the invisible architecture of desire, it did not die with him. It has been waiting for the man who is tired enough of losing to finally listen. That man is you. And this is the hour that changes everything. I am not going to waste your time with motivational nonsense. I am not going to tell you to believe in yourself, to just be confident, to smile more and open up, and show her your sensitive side. You have heard all of that before. You followed that advice. And where did it lead you? To the same place it leads every man who treats attraction like a kindness competition. Nowhere. Confused. Alone. Watching men who seem to break every rule succeed effortlessly with the women you want. So we are done with that. We are done with the comfortable lies. What I am offering you over the next 60 minutes is uncomfortable truth. Cold, precise, and deeply Machiavellian truth about what actually makes a woman choose you. Not the man to your left, not the man to your right, but you. 5 teachings. That is all it takes. Not 50, not 500. 5 principles extracted from the mind of the most ruthless strategist in Western history and applied, not to politics, not to warfare, but to the most complex battlefield a man will ever face. The space between him and the woman he desires. But I need to be honest with you before we begin. These teachings will not work if you treat them as techniques. If you are looking for pickup lines, close this video. If you want a script to memorize, you are in the wrong place. What I am about to share operates at a level far deeper than behavior. It operates at the level of identity. The 5 teachings do not teach you what to do. They reshape who you are. And when who you are changes, what women feel in your presence changes automatically. You will not need to perform confidence. You will be confident. You will not need to fake mystery. You will be mysterious, because a man who has done the deep work of self-mastery is, by definition, someone most people cannot easily read. This is the Machiavellian way, not tricks, transformation. Now, let us address the elephant in the room. Why Machiavelli? Why take dating advice from a political philosopher who lived in Renaissance Italy, who never wrote a single word about romance, who spent his life advising princes and analyzing power struggles between city-states? Because attraction is a power struggle. And anyone who tells you otherwise is either naive or selling you something. I do not say that with cynicism. I say it with clarity. Every interaction between a man and a woman who are attracted to each other, or who could be attracted to each other, is a negotiation of power. Who leans in first, who texts first, who cares more, who needs the other more, who is willing to walk away, who sets the frame, who follows it. These are not romantic questions, these are strategic ones. And Machiavelli was the greatest strategic mind the modern world has ever produced. When Machiavelli wrote that it is better to be feared than loved, he was not encouraging cruelty. He was making an observation about human nature that has been proven true in every century since. Love is fickle. Love depends on the mood of the one giving it. Love can be withdrawn on a whim, based on emotion, based on a bad day, based on a more attractive option walking through the door. But respect, the deep, almost involuntary respect that comes from perceiving someone as powerful, composed, and not easily shaken, that endures. That does not evaporate when the excitement fades. That is the bedrock on which lasting attraction is built. Translate this to relationships. A woman can love you and still leave you. History is filled with women who loved good men and left them for dangerous ones. Not because the dangerous men were better, but because the dangerous men triggered something that the good men did not. Something primal, something older than language, older than culture, older than morality. A feeling of challenge, a sense that this man is not fully conquered. A whisper in the back of her mind that says, I do not completely have him. And that whisper, that uncertainty, is the oxygen that keeps the fire of desire alive. Kill the uncertainty, and you kill the desire. It is that simple, and that devastating. This is what the first man at the restaurant did wrong. He eliminated every shred of uncertainty. He showed all his cards in the first hand. He texted her the next morning. He complimented her 3 times before the appetizers arrived. He agreed with everything she said. He laughed too loudly at her jokes. He was transparent, available, and predictable. In short, he was safe. And safety in the economy of attraction is worthless. The second man understood what Machiavelli understood, that the appearance of scarcity creates value, that controlled distance generates pull, that a man who is fully present but never fully revealed is a puzzle that a woman cannot stop trying to solve. Not because he is playing games, but because he has genuine depth, because he has boundaries, because his validation is not for sale. This is the fundamental error that most men make, and it is so deeply ingrained that they do not even recognize it as an error. They believe that showing a woman how much they care is the path to her heart. And in theory, it sounds beautiful. In practice, it is suicide. Not because caring is wrong, caring is essential, but the timing, the dosage, the delivery, these are everything. A medicine that heals in small amounts can kill in large ones. And affection, poured out too early, too freely, too eagerly, does not make a woman feel loved. It makes her feel suffocated. It makes her feel like she has already won. And a game that has already been won is a game that is no longer interesting to play. Machiavelli wrote about this in the context of generosity. He observed that a prince who gives too freely is eventually taken for granted and despised, while a prince who gives selectively and strategically is valued and respected. Replace prince with man. Replace subjects with the woman you desire. The lesson is identical. Your attention, your time, your emotional investment, these are your currency. And a man who spends his currency recklessly is a man who will soon find himself bankrupt. So what does a Machiavellian approach to attraction actually look like in practice? It does not look cold. It does not look calculated. From the outside, it looks natural. It looks like a man who is genuinely interesting, genuinely confident, genuinely selective. It looks like a man who enjoys the company of women, but does not need it. A man who can walk into a date with the quiet certainty that he is the prize, not because he is arrogant, but because he has built a life that he values more than any single person's approval. This is the key distinction. Arrogance says, I am better than you. Confidence says, I do not need you to validate me. The arrogant man repels, the confident man attracts. And Machiavellian confidence, the specific brand of self-assurance that we are building in this video, goes even further. It says, I understand the game we are playing. I understand the dynamics at work. I understand what you are testing for when you test me, and I am not afraid of any of it. That energy is magnetic, it is rare, and it is the single most attractive quality a man can possess. Why is it so rare? Because it requires something that most men are unwilling to do. It requires solitude, not loneliness, solitude. The deliberate, chosen act of spending time alone with yourself, building yourself, confronting your weaknesses, and forging something stronger in the fire of self-discipline. The man who fears being alone is the man who will always compromise his power for companionship. He will tolerate disrespect to avoid conflict. He will lower his standards to avoid loneliness. He will abandon his boundaries the moment a beautiful woman smiles at him. And she will sense all of this, not consciously, but instinctively. Women are extraordinarily calibrated to detect weakness in men, not because they are cruel, but because, on a biological level, they are wired to evaluate strength. And a man who cannot stand on his own is not strong, no matter how tall he is, no matter how much he earns, no matter how charming his words. Machiavelli wrote that a prince must be like the fox and the lion, the fox to detect traps, the lion to frighten wolves. In attraction, the fox is your awareness, your ability to read situations, to understand what is really being communicated beneath the surface of words, to see the tests and games for what they are. The lion is your backbone, your willingness to walk away, to hold your ground, to say no when every instinct screams at you to say yes, because she is beautiful and you are afraid of losing her. Most men are neither the fox nor the lion. They are the lamb. They walk into every situation trusting that goodness will be rewarded, that sincerity will be recognized, that effort will be appreciated. And sometimes it is. But far more often, the lamb is devoured, not by a cruel woman, but by his own ignorance of the terrain. He does not understand that attraction has rules. He does not understand that those rules are not fair, not moral, not logical. They are biological, psychological, and profoundly Machiavellian. Until now. Because from this moment forward, you are no longer the lamb. You are being given the eyes of the fox and the heart of the lion. You are being given a framework that does not just help you with women. It restructures how you move through the entire world. A man who masters these 5 teachings does not just become more attractive. He becomes more powerful in his career, more respected among his peers, more grounded in his own identity. Because the principles of power are universal. They do not change whether you are sitting across from a woman at dinner or sitting across from an adversary in a boardroom. That is the beauty of Machiavelli. His teachings do not expire. They do not depend on trends or culture or technology. They are rooted in human nature. And human nature does not change. The same forces that governed the courts of Renaissance Florence govern the dating landscape of the modern world. Status, perception, mystery, the strategic use of silence, the calculated deployment of attention, the willingness to walk away from what you desire in order to ultimately obtain it. 5 teachings, 5 weapons that you will carry with you for the rest of your life. Not against women, never against women. Against your own weakness, against the programming that has kept you playing a game you were designed to lose, against the comfortable mediocrity of being just another man in the crowd, hoping to be noticed, praying to be chosen. But before the first teaching arrives, I want you to sit with something uncomfortable for a moment. I want you to think about the last woman who rejected you. Not the surface memory, not the text she did not answer or the date that went cold. I want you to think about what you felt in the days that followed. That hollow sensation in your chest. That obsessive replaying of every conversation, every moment, looking for the crack, the mistake, the fatal error. That sickening mix of shame and confusion that made you question your own worth as a man. Now I want you to realize something. That pain was not caused by her. It was caused by the gap between who you were and who you needed to be. She did not reject you because you were not good enough. She rejected the version of you that had been constructed by a world that does not want you to be powerful. She rejected the performance, the eagerness, the transparency, the need that leaked out of every pore no matter how hard you tried to hide it. She rejected what she sensed beneath your words. Not your character, but your lack of center. Your lack of gravity, your lack of that quiet, immovable something that separates men who are chosen from men who are overlooked. And that gap between who you are now and who you could become is exactly what we are going to close. Machiavelli understood that transformation is not comfortable. In The Prince, he wrote that there is nothing more difficult to take in hand, more perilous to conduct, or more uncertain in its success than to take the lead in the introduction of a new order of things. He was talking about political revolution. But the same truth applies to personal revolution. When you decide to change the fundamental way you interact with women and with the world, you are overthrowing a regime, the regime of your old self. And every old habit, every familiar pattern, every comfortable weakness will resist. They will fight to survive. They will whisper to you that this is not who you really are, that you should go back to being the nice, safe, predictable man you were before. Do not listen. That voice is not your true self trying to protect you. It is your old self trying to survive. And your old self, the one who chases, who over-explains, who gives away his power like a man throwing coins into a crowd hoping someone will love him for his generosity. That self must die for the new one to be born. This is not metaphor. This is the brutal reality of transformation. You cannot become the man who commands attraction while still clinging to the habits of the man who begged for it. I want you to think about water for a moment. Water is the softest substance on earth. It yields to everything. It takes the shape of whatever contains it. And yet, given enough time, water carves through stone. It reshapes mountains. It redirects rivers. Not through force, through persistence and patience. That is the kind of power we are building here. Not the loud, aggressive, chest-beating kind that insecure men mistake for strength. The quiet, relentless, erosive kind. The kind that does not announce itself but cannot be ignored. The kind that a woman feels in her bones when she sits across from you and cannot explain why she does not want the evening to end. This is the power of the Machiavellian man. He is not the storm. He is the tide. The storm is dramatic, loud, destructive, and it passes. The tide is silent, consistent, inevitable, and it reshapes the entire coastline. Every man who has ever tried to attract a woman by being louder, flashier, more aggressive, he was the storm. Impressive for a moment, forgotten by morning. The man who attracts through depth, through mystery, through the quiet gravity of self-possession. He is the tide. And she will feel his pull long after the storms have passed. Let me paint you a picture of what your life looks like 6 months from now if you truly absorb what this video teaches. You walk differently, not with swagger, with certainty. Your steps are unhurried because you are not chasing anything. Your eyes are steady because you are not looking for approval. When you enter a social setting, you do not scan the room for the most attractive woman. You settle into the space. You become part of it. You let the room come to you. And it does. Because a man who is not seeking attention becomes, paradoxically, the center of it. When you meet a woman who interests you, you do not rush. You do not flood her with compliments. You do not try to fill every silence with words. You hold space, real, comfortable, powerful space. And you let the tension build naturally. You ask questions that reveal her depth, not her surface. You challenge her ideas with respect, not with aggression. You disagree when you disagree, and you do it without apology. And when the evening ends, you do not send a paragraph-long text about how amazing she is. You send nothing, or you send something brief, something that makes her smile and wonder at the same time, something that leaves a door open but does not walk through it. And she thinks about you. Not because you performed, not because you dazzled her, but because you gave her something that almost no man in her life has ever given her, the experience of not being able to fully figure someone out, the delicious frustration of wanting more from a man who clearly has more to give, but is in no rush to give it. The rare, intoxicating feeling of being in the presence of someone who does not need her, and is therefore endlessly fascinating. That is where you are heading. That is the man waiting on the other side of these 5 teachings. You are done hoping. You are done praying. You are done waiting for permission to become the man you were meant to be. The first teaching is about to unfold, and it begins with the most counterintuitive truth in the entire landscape of attraction. A truth so sharp that when you hear it, it will feel like a blade cutting through every lie you have ever believed about what makes a woman want you. Stay. Listen. Absorb. Because the man who leaves this video will not be the man who arrived. That is not a promise. That is a warning. Teaching number 1. The law of controlled absence. This is where everything begins. This is the foundation upon which the other 4 teachings are built. And if you get this wrong, nothing else matters. You could be the most intelligent, most successful, most physically attractive man in the room, and still lose her. Because this teaching strikes at the root of desire itself. Here it is, in its simplest form. Your presence must be earned, never given freely. Read that again. Let it settle. Because every instinct you have, every romantic impulse, every urge to be available, every desire to show her that you care, is fighting against this truth right now. Your conditioning is screaming at you that this is wrong, that a good man shows up, that a real man is present, that effort equals love. And I am telling you, with the weight of 5 centuries of Machiavellian wisdom behind me, that those instincts are the very thing destroying your chances. Machiavelli observed a pattern in the courts of Renaissance Italy that applies perfectly to the dynamics of modern attraction. He noticed that the advisors who were always present, always available, always eager to serve, they were the ones the prince took for granted. They were furniture, reliable, yes, useful perhaps, but never valued, never feared, never truly respected. The advisors who commanded real influence were the ones whose presence was irregular, the ones who arrived with purpose and departed with mystery, the ones the prince could not fully predict or control. Those were the men who shaped history from the shadows. Now apply this to your life with women. Think about the last time you were completely available to a woman you wanted. You answered every text within minutes. You rearranged your schedule to see her. You cancelled plans with friends because she suddenly became free. You were there, always there, like a light she could switch on whenever the room felt dark. And what happened? She dimmed. Her interest faded. Her responses became shorter. She started taking longer to reply. She began cancelling plans. And you, in your desperation, became even more available, thinking that more presence would fix what your constant presence had already broken. This is the paradox that Machiavelli understood and that most men spend their entire lives failing to grasp. The more available you are, the less valuable you become. Not because availability is inherently bad, but because humans are wired to value what is scarce and dismiss what is abundant. This is not a theory. This is not an opinion. This is the fundamental operating system of human desire, and it runs beneath every interaction you will ever have with a woman, whether you acknowledge it or not. The law of controlled absence does not mean you disappear. It does not mean you play childish games of ignoring her for days and then reappearing with no explanation. That is not strategy. That is insecurity wearing a mask of indifference. Controlled absence means that your time and attention are genuinely scarce, not artificially, but because your life is full, because you have pursuits, ambitions, disciplines, and interests that do not revolve around her. Because when you are not with her, you are building something, training something, learning something, becoming something. And she can feel that. She can sense that when you leave her presence, you are not sitting by the phone waiting for her to reach out. You are living, fully and unapologetically. This is what creates the magnetic pull. When a man has a life that is rich enough to compete with her presence, she instinctively understands that his attention is a gift, not a given. And gifts, by their nature, are valued more than entitlements. The man who is always there becomes an entitlement. The man who appears with intention and withdraws with grace becomes a gift she never wants to lose. Let me give you a concrete picture of how this works. Imagine you meet a woman on a Saturday night. The connection is real. The conversation flows. The eye contact is electric. There is chemistry that neither of you can deny. The old you would text her Sunday morning. Something eager. Something that says, "I had an amazing time and I cannot stop thinking about you." The Machiavellian, you does something different. You wait. Not out of games, not out of manipulation, but because Sunday morning belongs to you. You train, you read, you work on the project that has been demanding your focus. You live your life. And when you do reach out, perhaps Monday evening, perhaps Tuesday, your message carries the weight of a man who has a full existence. It does not reek of desperation. It does not scream, "I have been thinking about you every second since we met." It says, simply and powerfully, that she crossed your mind, and you chose to act on it when the moment felt right. That pause, those 24, 36, 48 hours, is not empty space. It is a canvas on which her imagination paints. She wonders. She replays the evening. She checks her phone. She tells her friends about you. And every hour of silence amplifies her curiosity, not because you are withholding, but because you are demonstrating without a single word that you are a man with gravity. A man who does not orbit her. A man who has his own center of gravity. And she is the one being pulled. Machiavelli wrote that men are so simple of mind and so much dominated by their immediate needs that a deceitful man will always find plenty who are ready to be deceived. But I am not teaching you deception. I am teaching you the opposite. I am teaching you to stop deceiving yourself, to stop pretending that being a loyal, ever-present, endlessly available man is attractive. It is not. It is convenient. And convenience is the death of desire. The woman who has you on demand does not fantasize about you. The woman who has to wait for you, not because you are cruel, but because your life demands your attention. She fantasizes constantly. Her mind fills the gaps you leave with mystery, with intrigue, with the delicious uncertainty of not knowing exactly where she stands. And that uncertainty, handled with warmth and integrity, is the most potent aphrodisiac in existence. Now, there is a critical nuance here that separates the Machiavellian man from the immature man who simply ignores women and calls it strategy. The difference is warmth. When you are present, you are fully present. You are attentive. You are engaged. You make her feel seen in a way that few men can. But when you are absent, you are fully absent. You do not hover. You do not send half-hearted check-in messages that serve no purpose other than to remind her you exist. You trust that your presence left an impact. And you let that impact work in silence. This combination, intense presence followed by confident absence, is devastatingly effective. It creates an emotional rhythm that mirrors the most addictive experiences in human psychology. The push and the pull, the wave and the withdrawal, the warmth of the sun followed by the coolness of the shade. One without the other is flat and forgettable. Together, they create a dynamic that a woman cannot ignore, because it mirrors the very rhythm of desire itself. Let this first teaching settle into your bones. Do not just understand it intellectually. Feel it. Feel the truth of it in every memory of every time you were too available and watched a woman's interest die. Feel it in the knowledge that your attention, your real, focused, undivided attention, is one of the most valuable things you possess. And you have been giving it away like a man who does not know the price of gold. That ends now. Teaching number 2. The weapon of strategic silence. If controlled absence governs how you manage your physical presence, then strategic silence governs how you manage your words. And this teaching, more than any other, will separate you from the ocean of mediocre men who talk themselves out of attraction every single day. Machiavelli wrote that everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. This is the essence of strategic silence. It is the understanding that every word you speak either adds to your mystery or subtracts from it. Every opinion you share, every story you tell, every emotion you express. It either deepens the intrigue of who you are or it flattens you into something predictable and ordinary. Most men talk too much. This is not an insult. It is an observation backed by centuries of strategic wisdom. When a man is nervous, he talks. When a man wants to impress, he talks. When a man feels the silence stretching between him and a beautiful woman, he panics and fills it with words, any words, just to kill the discomfort. And in doing so, he kills something far more valuable: the tension. Tension is the invisible thread that connects desire to action. Without tension, there is no anticipation. Without anticipation, there is no excitement. Without excitement, there is no attraction. And the fastest way to destroy tension is to fill every silence with noise. The man who cannot tolerate silence is a man who cannot tolerate power, because power, real power, lives in the spaces between words. Think about the most powerful figures you have ever encountered, in life, in history, in fiction. Think about the men and women who walked into a room and changed its atmosphere without saying a word. They were not the loudest. They were not the most talkative. They were the ones who spoke when they had something worth saying, and remained silent the rest of the time. Their silence was not emptiness. It was gravity. It pulled people toward them because it suggested depth, suggested mystery, suggested that behind those still eyes was a mind that was processing far more than it was revealing. Now think about how most men behave on a date. They arrive with a mental list of impressive stories. They talk about their job, their travels, their accomplishments, not because the woman asked, but because they believe that sharing these things will make her see their value. They mistake volume for substance. They confuse talking about themselves with building attraction, and by the end of the evening, the woman knows everything about them and feels nothing. Because knowledge without mystery is information, and information does not seduce. Mystery seduces. The strategically silent man operates differently. He asks more than he tells. He listens with a focus that most men reserve only for things they find personally urgent. When she speaks, he does not plan his next sentence. He absorbs what she is saying. He notices the words she chooses. He catches the things she almost says, but pulls back from. He reads her body language, her pauses, her shifts in energy. And when he does speak, his words land with weight, because they are responses, not performances. They are tailored to the moment, not rehearsed in the mirror. This is the difference between a man who talks at a woman and a man who communicates with her. The first is a monologue. The second is a dance. And women, particularly intelligent, emotionally perceptive women, can feel the difference instantly. The man who talks at her is easy to categorize. He goes into a mental box, labeled eager, predictable, safe. The man who communicates through questions, through silence, through the occasional observation that cuts straight to something she has never said aloud. That man cannot be boxed. He stays in her thoughts because she has not figured him out yet, and the desire to figure him out is what brings her back. Machiavelli understood that information is power, and that the man who reveals his hand too early loses his advantage. In the context of attraction, your thoughts, your feelings, your past, your vulnerabilities, these are your cards. And a master player does not show his cards simply because someone is sitting across the table. He reveals them selectively, strategically, at moments that serve his position. Not to deceive, but to maintain the dynamic tension that keeps the game alive. Here is a practical application. A woman asks you what you are looking for in a relationship. The average man launches into a detailed answer. He wants someone kind, someone loyal, someone who shares his values, someone who laughs at his jokes. He answers the question fully and completely, thinking that transparency equals trustworthiness. And it does, but trustworthiness alone does not create attraction. It creates comfort. And comfort, in the early stages of dating, is the enemy of desire. The Machiavellian man answers differently. He pauses. He holds her gaze for a beat longer than expected. And then he says something like, "I will know it when I find it," or, "I am more interested in what someone shows me than what they tell me." These are not evasions. They are invitations. They say, "I am not going to make this easy for you." They say you do not get to understand me just by asking. You have to earn that understanding through time and depth and shared experience. And that challenge, that subtle, respectful challenge, ignites something in her that a detailed answer never could. Silence is also your greatest weapon in moments of conflict or testing, because women will test you. Not out of malice, out of instinct. A woman tests a man the way an engineer stress tests a bridge. She needs to know if you can hold. She needs to know if pressure reveals cracks or if it reveals steel. And the tests come in many forms: a provocative comment, a sudden withdrawal of affection, a comparison to another man, a question designed to make you defensive. The average man fails these tests by reacting. He gets emotional. He explains himself. He seeks reassurance. He argues. He tries to prove that he is worthy. And every one of those reactions is a signal of weakness. Because they all say the same thing. Your opinion of me matters more than my opinion of myself. The strategically silent man passes these tests by not reacting. He absorbs the provocation the way stone absorbs rain, without changing shape. He might smile slightly. He might raise an eyebrow. He might say nothing at all and let the silence do the talking. And in that silence, the woman finds her answer. This is a man who cannot be shaken. This is a man whose center does not shift based on what I say or do. This is a man who is anchored in something deeper than my approval, and that realization does not push her away. It pulls her in with a force that she may not even understand. Let me be specific about how silence works in real situations. When she says something designed to provoke you, perhaps she mentions another man, perhaps she questions your career, perhaps she challenges your opinion in a way that feels personal. Do not rush to respond. Breathe, hold eye contact, let 1 full second pass, then 2. That brief silence communicates more power than any clever comeback ever could. It says, I heard you. I am not threatened, and I will respond on my terms, not yours. When she asks a personal question that you are not ready to answer, about your past, your feelings, your intentions, you do not owe anyone the full truth on their timeline. You can say that is a conversation for another night and smile. You can say I'm still deciding what I think about that. You can simply redirect with a question of your own. Each of these responses maintains your mystery while communicating something that full transparency cannot. I am in control of my narrative. You do not get to read the entire book tonight. And that control, that self-authored pacing of how much you reveal and when, is extraordinarily attractive to women because it demonstrates a quality that most men lack entirely. Self-possession. Self-possession. Remember that word. It is the thread that connects every teaching in this video. A self-possessed man does not need external validation to feel whole. He does not need a woman's compliment to feel attractive. He does not need her laughter to feel funny. He does not need her presence to feel alive. He is complete, not perfect, but complete. And from that completeness, he engages with the world on his own terms. 2 teachings down, 3 remain. And if these first 2 have already begun to shift something inside you, if you are starting to see the patterns you have been blind to, the mistakes you have been making, the power you have been giving away, then you are ready for what comes next. Because the next teaching does not just challenge how you behave with women, it challenges the very foundation of how you see yourself. And once that foundation cracks, something far stronger will be built in its place. Let me leave you with an image before we move forward. Picture 2 swords. One is polished, decorated, encrusted with jewels, beautiful to look at, but dull at the edge. The other is plain, unadorned, dark metal, but its blade can split a hair in mid-air. The first sword is the man who talks to impress. The second is the man who speaks to impact. The first draws attention with noise. The second commands respect with precision. Most men spend their lives polishing the wrong sword. They add more words, more stories, more compliments, thinking that decoration creates power. It does not. Sharpness creates power, and sharpness comes from removing what is unnecessary, not adding what is excessive. Machiavelli himself embodied this principle. His writings are not flowery or verbose. They are surgical. Every sentence serves a purpose. Every observation cuts to the bone of human behavior without wasting a single word on pleasantry or padding. He did not write to be liked. He wrote to be understood. And 5 centuries later, his words still echo. Not because they were many, but because they were precise. Be precise in your words, in your presence, in your attention. A precise man is a dangerous man. Dangerous because he cannot be manipulated through flattery, cannot be distracted through noise, and cannot be predicted through patterns. He is the man who says less than necessary and lets the weight of what he does say reshape the room. The first 2 teachings, controlled absence and strategic silence, have already given you more power than most men accumulate in a lifetime of trying. But the next teaching will take that power and forge it into something permanent, something that does not depend on any specific woman, any specific situation, any specific outcome, something that lives inside you and radiates outward, whether you are at a dinner table or walking alone down an empty street. But the coldest move is still to come. Stay with me. The third teaching will change the way you walk through every room for the rest of your life. Teaching number 3. The sovereignty of standards. This is the teaching that most men will resist the hardest, not because it is complex, it is devastatingly simple, but because it demands something that our culture has spent decades trying to erase from men, the unapologetic right to be selective. Here is the teaching in its raw form. A man without standards is a man without value. Let that cut. Because right now, somewhere inside you, a voice is protesting. It is saying that having standards is arrogant, that being selective is shallow, that a good man accepts people as they are. And that voice, that well-trained, socially conditioned voice, is the reason you keep ending up with women who do not respect you, do not challenge you, and do not add anything to your life except the temporary relief of not being alone. Machiavelli wrote that the first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. Replace ruler with man. Replace men with women. The woman you choose to invest your time in is a direct reflection of how you see yourself. If you accept anyone who gives you attention, you are telling the world, and more importantly, telling yourself, that your attention has no price, that your time has no gate, that your life is an open field where anyone can walk in and set up camp without earning the right to be there. And women read this. They read it in the way you tolerate disrespect, in the way you accept cancellations without consequence, in the way you continue pursuing a woman who has shown you, through her actions, that she does not value your presence. Every time you chase a woman who is not chasing you back, you are broadcasting a message louder than anything you could ever say with words. I do not believe I deserve better than this. The sovereign man, the Machiavellian man, operates with a different code. He does not pursue women who do not meet his standards. And his standards are not superficial. They are not about looks or status or the way she photographs. His standards are architectural. They are about character, about reciprocity, about whether this woman adds depth to his life or merely occupies space in it, about whether she challenges him intellectually, respects his boundaries, and invests in the connection with the same seriousness he does. When a woman cancels a date at the last minute without a compelling reason, the average man says, "No problem, we can reschedule." He swallows his disappointment. He pretends it does not bother him. He rearranges his dignity to make room for her indifference. The sovereign man responds differently. He does not explode in anger. He does not send a passive-aggressive message. He simply does not reschedule. He does not bring it up. He continues living his life. And if she reaches out again, he evaluates, calmly, without emotion, whether her actions have demonstrated that his time is something she respects. If they have not, he moves on, without drama, without explanation, without looking back. This is not cruelty. This is self-respect with teeth, and the distinction matters enormously. Cruelty punishes the other person. Self-respect protects you. The sovereign man is not trying to hurt the woman who disrespected his time. He is simply refusing to teach her that his time can be disrespected without consequence. Because every time you accept poor treatment and return for more, you are not being kind. You are training her to treat you poorly. You are establishing a precedent that says this man will tolerate anything, which means this man values nothing, including himself. Machiavelli observed that people will always be ungrateful, fickle, false, cowardly, and covetous when they face no consequences. Remove consequences, and you remove respect. This applies to politics, it applies to business, and it applies, with surgical precision, to the dynamics between men and women. Here is what happens when you become a man of standards. At first, your dating life may seem to slow down. You will say no to women you once would have said yes to, not because they are bad, but because they are not right. You will walk away from situations that once would have kept you hooked out of loneliness or scarcity. You will spend more time alone, and that solitude will feel uncomfortable until it starts feeling powerful. Because in that solitude, you are recalibrating your sense of self. You are raising the internal bar that determines what you accept into your life. And when you raise that bar, something remarkable happens. The quality of women who enter your life rises to meet it. This is not magic. This is energy. A man who knows his worth projects it in every micro-expression, every posture, every word he chooses, and every word he withholds. Women sense it the way animals sense weather changes, not through logic, but through instinct. When a man with high standards enters a room, there is something about him that signals this man is not available to everyone. And that signal, paradoxically, makes him available to the women who matter, the ones who are themselves high value enough to recognize and respect what they see. Let me give you a scenario. You are at a social event. A woman approaches you. She is attractive. She is charming. She flirts. The old you would have been flattered, eager, immediately invested. The sovereign you observes. You engage warmly, but you are watching. You notice whether she asks you questions or only talks about herself. You notice whether she is present in the conversation or scanning the room for something better. You notice whether her interest feels genuine or performative. And based on what you observe, not what you hope, not what you wish, but what you actually see, you decide whether to invest further or withdraw gracefully. This is not paranoia. This is discernment. And discernment is the hallmark of every powerful figure Machiavelli ever studied. The prince who trusts everyone is overthrown. The prince who trusts no one is isolated. The prince who trusts selectively, based on observed behavior, not promised words, is the one who endures. Be that prince in your dating life, in your friendships, in every relationship you build from this moment forward. Teaching number 4. The architecture of emotional control. If the first 3 teachings have been the construction of your external power, how you manage your presence, your words, and your standards, then this 4th teaching is the forging of your internal power. And without it, the first 3 collapse. Because a man who cannot control his emotions will eventually betray every strategy he has learned. His jealousy will override his silence. His insecurity will dissolve his standards. His desperation will flood the space that his absence was supposed to create. Emotional control is not suppression. Hear that clearly. I am not telling you to feel nothing. I am not telling you to become a robot. Machiavelli was not a robot. He was a man of deep passions, deep convictions, deep feeling. But he understood something that separates the strategist from the fool. It is not what you feel that determines your fate. It is what you do with what you feel. The average man is a slave to his emotions. When he feels jealousy, he acts on it. He interrogates. He accuses. He clings. When he feels insecurity, he acts on it. He seeks reassurance. He over-communicates. He smothers. When he feels anger, he acts on it. He explodes. He says things he cannot take back. He damages connections that took months to build. He is reactive. His emotions are the hand on the wheel, and he is merely a passenger being taken wherever they decide to go. The Machiavellian man is different. He feels everything the average man feels. The jealousy, the insecurity, the anger, the desire, the fear of loss. But between the feeling and the action, there is a space. And in that space lives his power. He observes his emotions the way a general observes the battlefield, with detachment, with clarity, with the understanding that what he sees is information, not instruction. His jealousy tells him something. His insecurity tells him something. But they do not tell him what to do. He decides what to do, based on strategy, based on long-term vision, based on who he is choosing to become rather than who his emotions are trying to make him. This is what makes a man magnetic in moments of tension. Because tension will come. She will mention another man. She will be distant for no apparent reason. She will test your composure with silence, with provocation, with the subtle cruelties that women sometimes deploy, consciously or unconsciously, to measure the strength of the man in front of them. And in those moments, the man who loses control loses everything. Let me paint the contrast. She mentions an ex-boyfriend. She describes him fondly. The average man feels a spike of jealousy and immediately responds, either by dismissing the ex, by competing with the memory, or by withdrawing into sulky silence. Every one of those reactions tells her the same thing. I am threatened. I am not secure. My sense of value depends on being your only reference point. And that insecurity, no matter how well he thinks he hid it, she detected it in the first syllable. The emotionally controlled man hears the same words and feels the same initial spike. But he does not react to the spike. He processes it. He recognizes it as his ego flaring, not as a legitimate threat. And then he responds, not from fear, but from strength. Perhaps he asks a genuinely curious follow-up question, showing that he is secure enough to discuss anything without feeling diminished. Perhaps he simply nods and moves the conversation forward, communicating that her past does not threaten his present. Perhaps he says nothing at all and lets his calm body language speak louder than any word could. In each of these responses, the message is the same. I am unshakable. Not because I do not feel, but because what I feel does not control what I do. And that message, delivered not through words but through composure, is one of the most attractive things a man can communicate. Machiavelli wrote about the concept of virtù, a word often mistranslated as virtue, but which actually means something closer to prowess or mastery. Virtù is the ability to impose your will on fortune, to shape circumstances, rather than be shaped by them. In the context of attraction, virtù is emotional mastery. It is the ability to feel the full spectrum of human emotion, desire, fear, love, anger, hope, disappointment, and still act with precision, still speak with intention, still move with purpose. The man who possesses virtù does not suppress his humanity. He channels it. He directs the river of his emotion through the landscape of his choosing, rather than letting it flood and destroy everything in its path. Here are practical situations where emotional control becomes your greatest weapon. She does not text back for 2 days. The average man checks his phone obsessively. He rereads his last message, looking for what went wrong. He considers sending a follow-up. He spirals into doubt. The Machiavellian man notices the silence, acknowledges the discomfort it creates, and then directs his energy elsewhere. He does not send a follow-up. He does not mention it when she eventually responds. He greets her reply with the same energy he would give it if she had responded in 5 minutes. Not to pretend it did not happen, but because his emotional state is not determined by her timeline. She flirts with another man in front of you. The average man either confronts her publicly, sulks visibly, or overcompensates by becoming louder and more aggressive in his own interactions. Each response screams insecurity. The Machiavellian man does none of these things. He observes. He remains composed. He may even excuse himself from the situation, not in retreat, but in sovereignty. He does not compete for attention he should not have to compete for, and later, in private, if the relationship warrants it, he addresses the situation calmly, without accusation, without emotion, simply stating what he observed and what his standards require. If her response does not satisfy him, he acts accordingly, not with anger, with clarity. She tells you she needs space. The average man panics. He floods her with messages. He demands explanations. He tries to negotiate his way back into her presence. The Machiavellian man says, "Take all the time you need," and means it, because his well-being does not depend on her proximity. He gives her the space she asked for and uses that space to reinvest in himself. And when she returns, and they almost always return to a man who respects the request without crumbling, she finds a man who did not fall apart in her absence, a man who was not diminished by her distance, a man who was, if anything, more centered, more focused, more himself than before she left. That is the power of emotional control, not coldness, not indifference, but the quiet, immovable certainty that you will be fine, regardless of what any single person decides to do. And that certainty, that deep, bone-level certainty, is the most attractive energy a man can carry. Teaching number 5, the dark art of walking away. This is the final teaching, the crown jewel, the one that ties every previous principle into a single devastating act of power. And it is the one that most men will never master, because it requires the one thing that desire makes almost impossible, the willingness to lose what you want in order to truly have it. Machiavelli understood that the man who cannot walk away from the table has already lost the negotiation. In politics, this principle is foundational. The leader who needs the alliance more than the ally needs him will always be exploited. The nation that cannot afford to go to war will always submit to the one that can. The capacity for loss, the genuine demonstrated willingness to accept the worst outcome, is the ultimate form of leverage. In attraction, this translates to a simple but terrifying truth. The man who can walk away from a woman is the man she will never want to let go. Not because women are perverse, not because they only want what they cannot have, but because a man who can walk away is demonstrating, in the most primal and undeniable way possible, that he values himself more than he values the relationship. And a man who values himself that highly must be valuable. This is the logic of attraction, not conscious, not verbal, but instinctive and irresistible. The capacity to walk away is not a bluff. This is critical to understand. If it is a bluff, if you threaten to leave, but she knows you will not, then you have not only lost the hand, you have lost all credibility for every future hand. Walking away must be real. It must be grounded in the genuine knowledge that your life, your mission, your self-respect are more important than any single person's presence in it. And reaching that genuine knowledge requires all 4 previous teachings working in concert. You must have a life rich enough that her absence does not empty it. You must have the self-control to silence the voice that begs you to stay. You must have standards high enough that walking away is a natural consequence of those standards being violated. And you must have the emotional control to execute the walk without theatrics, without cruelty, without looking back. Here is how this works in practice. You are in a relationship. Things are good, but gradually she begins to take you for granted. The effort becomes one-sided. She cancels plans more frequently. She is less affectionate. She is less present. The average man addresses this with words. He talks about his feelings. He asks what is wrong. He suggests couples counseling. He writes letters. He tries harder. And sometimes this works. But more often, it deepens the very dynamic that caused the problem. Because the harder he tries, the more he confirms that he needs her more than she needs him. The Machiavellian man does something different. He does not beg. He does not negotiate. He begins to withdraw his investment, not as punishment, but as self-preservation. He becomes less available. He focuses more on his own life. He stops filling the silence that she created. And if the pattern continues, if she does not course correct, if she does not match his withdrawal with effort, he walks away. Cleanly, respectfully, without ultimatums, without dramatic speeches. He simply removes himself from a situation that no longer serves him. And then something extraordinary happens. In his absence, she feels the void. Not the void of loneliness, the void of losing a man of substance. A man who was warm, but not desperate. A man who was present, but not dependent. A man who loved, but was not enslaved by his love. And that void is louder than any conversation, any argument, any tearful plea could ever be. Because it communicates the one thing that words cannot. I am a man who will walk through fire for the right woman. But I will not stand in the rain for one who does not see my worth. This is the dark art. It is dark not because it is cruel, but because it requires you to act against your deepest emotional impulses. Every fiber of your being will scream stay. Every memory of her smile, her touch, her laugh will pull you back like gravity. And in that moment, the man you choose to be is the man you will become. The man who stays, despite his own erosion, becomes smaller with every compromise. The man who walks away, despite his own desire, becomes larger with every step. Machiavelli would call this the ultimate expression of virtù, the willingness to endure short-term pain for long-term power. The prince who retreats from a battle he cannot win lives to fight another day. The man who walks away from a woman who does not value him lives to find one who does. And that next woman, the one who sees him not as a safety net but as a sovereign, she is the reward for every lonely night, every unanswered text, every moment of doubt that he survived on the way to becoming who he truly is. 5 teachings, 5 weapons forged in the mind of the most ruthless strategist history has ever known. Controlled absence, strategic silence, the sovereignty of standards, emotional architecture, and the dark art of walking away. Together, they do not just make you more attractive to women, they make you more powerful as a man, more grounded, more respected, more dangerous. Not in a way that harms, but in a way that commands. At this point, something has shifted inside you. You can feel it. The old patterns are cracking. The old excuses are losing their grip. The man who started this video is not the man sitting here now, and the transformation is not over. It has barely begun. What comes next is the final stage, the integration, the moment where these 5 teachings stop being ideas and become identity, where the Machiavellian man stops being a concept and starts being you. This is the transformation that lasts. Stay with me. We are almost there. You are not the same man who pressed play on this video. Something has shifted, something behind your eyes, something in the way you are sitting right now, in the way you are breathing, in the quiet current of energy that runs through your chest. You may not be able to name it yet, but it is there. And it has been growing with every word, every teaching, every uncomfortable truth that landed in a place you did not know was open. This is what metamorphosis feels like from the inside, not fireworks. Not a dramatic revelation accompanied by orchestral music. It feels quiet. It feels like clarity replacing fog. Like a lens being adjusted until the blurry shapes of the world snap into focus and you see, truly see, what was always there but hidden behind the noise of your conditioning. Let me tell you who you were before this video. And I say this not to shame you, but to honor the distance you have just traveled. You were a man who confused effort with attraction, who believed that trying harder would make her want you more, who measured his worth by a woman's response and crumbled when that response was silence. You were a man who gave his attention like a man who did not know its price, who spoke to fill the silence instead of letting the silence speak for him, who had no standards, not because he did not want them, but because he feared that having standards meant having fewer options, and fewer options, to a man starving for connection, felt like death. You were a man who let his emotions drive, who sent that text at 2 a.m. because the loneliness was louder than his dignity, who apologized when he had done nothing wrong, who stayed when every signal told him to leave, who walked back into situations that diminished him because the alternative Standing alone, choosing himself, walking away, felt like a kind of violence against his own heart. That man served you. He kept you alive. He got you through the nights and the failures and the rejections and the quiet moments of doubt that no one else ever saw. Do not hate him, but understand this. He cannot take you where you need to go. The same strategies that helped you survive will prevent you from thriving. The same softness that made you a good man made you an invisible one. And invisibility, in the arena of attraction, is not safety. It is slow death. Now let me tell you who you are becoming. You are becoming a man whose presence is felt before his words are heard. A man who walks into a room and does not scan it for approval, because he carries his own. A man who does not chase, because his life is moving in a direction that is more compelling than any single person's validation. A man whose silence is more interesting than most men's speeches, whose eye contact does not waver, whose standards are not negotiable, whose emotional center is not for sale at any price, to any person, under any circumstance. You are becoming the man that Machiavelli would have recognized, not the prince who begs for love from his subjects. The prince who earns respect through composure, through strategy, through the quiet demonstration that he is a man of substance and depth and unshakable self-knowledge. The prince who does not need the throne to feel like royalty, because royalty, real royalty, is not a title. It is an energy. It is the way you hold yourself when no one is watching, the way you treat yourself when no one is measuring, the way you walk away from what does not serve you, even when walking away feels like walking into fire. Let me consolidate the 5 teachings one final time, not as lessons to memorize, but as pillars to internalize. The first teaching, controlled absence, taught you that your presence is a currency, and a currency that is spent freely is a currency that loses value. Your time, your attention, your availability. These are not gifts you scatter at the feet of anyone who smiles at you. They are investments. And a wise investor is selective, patient, and disciplined. When you master controlled absence, you stop being the man who is always there and start being the man she is always thinking about, because the space you leave is not emptiness. It is a stage on which her desire performs. The second teaching, strategic silence, taught you that words are weapons, and weapons wielded carelessly wound the wielder. Most men drown their attractiveness in a flood of unnecessary speech. They explain themselves. They fill silences. They talk about their feelings before their feelings have been earned. The strategically silent man understands that mystery is the mother of attraction, and that every word he withholds is a door the woman in front of him desperately wants to open. He speaks when his words carry weight. He is silent when silence carries more. The third teaching, the sovereignty of standards, taught you that a man without standards is a man without a spine. Your standards are not walls that keep women out. They are gates that let the right ones in. When you accept poor treatment, you are not being forgiving. You are being complicit in your own erosion. The sovereign man knows what he deserves because he knows what he has built within himself, and he does not discount his own worth to avoid the discomfort of being alone. He would rather stand in solitude with his dignity intact than kneel in a relationship that requires him to abandon his self-respect. The fourth teaching, emotional architecture, taught you that feelings are data, not directives. The man who is controlled by his jealousy, his insecurity, his fear of abandonment is a man who has handed the steering wheel to his weakest impulses. The emotionally masterful man feels everything, deeply, intensely, fully, but he creates a space between feeling and action in which his higher self can intervene. He does not react. He responds. He does not explode. He observes. He does not beg. He decides. And that gap, that sacred, cultivated gap between stimulus and response, is where his power lives. The fifth teaching, The dark art of walking away taught you the ultimate truth of attraction and of life itself. The man who cannot lose is the man who cannot win. Walking away is not abandonment. It is the purest form of self-selection. It says, I choose myself. Not over you, but enough that I will not remain where I am not valued. And that choice, exercised with calm and without malice, communicates more about your worth than 1,000 words ever could. The woman who watches you walk away does not see a man leaving. She sees a man who knows his value. And that sight, that unforgettable, unmistakable sight, is what brings her back. Or, if she does not return, it is what prepares you for the woman who will never let you walk away again, because she will be too busy walking toward you. These 5 teachings are not techniques. They are not strategies to be deployed and discarded. They are the architecture of a new identity. They are the bones of the man you were always meant to become, the man that circumstances, conditioning, and cowardice conspired to bury beneath layers of people-pleasing and desperate availability. You are not learning something new. You are remembering something ancient, something that Machiavelli did not invent but merely had the courage to articulate, something that lives in the DNA of every man who has ever commanded respect, fascination, and desire, not through performance, but through the raw, unshakable reality of who he was. And now I want to share with you the final paradox, the truth that sits beneath all 5 teachings like bedrock beneath a fortress. And it is this: the man who masters these teachings does not use them to get women. He uses them to become himself. And becoming himself is what gets the women. Read that again, because it is the key to everything. The moment you apply these principles as tactics, as moves in a game, as tools to manipulate a specific outcome with a specific woman, you have already failed. You have turned Machiavelli's wisdom into a parlor trick, and parlor tricks do not create lasting change. But the moment you apply these principles as identity, as expressions of who you are choosing to be, regardless of who is watching, regardless of the outcome, you have become something that no technique, no strategy, no book on attraction could ever manufacture. You have become real, a real man who is selectively present, a real man who speaks with intention, a real man who holds standards without apology, a real man who masters his emotions without suppressing them, a real man who is willing to walk away from what does not honor him. That man does not attract women because he is playing a game. He attracts women because he is the game. He is the challenge they have been looking for in a world of men who offer no challenge at all. He is the depth in an ocean of surfaces. He is the silence in a world that will not stop screaming. And the greatest irony, the paradox that Machiavelli himself would appreciate, is that the man who stops trying to attract women becomes the most attractive man in the room. Because the energy of pursuit is the energy of lack. The energy of self-possession is the energy of abundance. And every woman alive, whether she can articulate it or not, can feel the difference between a man who wants something from her and a man who wants nothing from her except what she freely and enthusiastically offers. Want nothing from her, not because you do not desire her, but because your desire is not a need. Your attraction is not a dependency. Your interest in her is a choice made from a place of fullness, not a grasp made from a place of emptiness. And when she feels that, when she looks into your eyes and sees a man who genuinely, deeply, authentically does not need her to complete himself, something in her soul shifts, something ancient and involuntary, something that says, this one is different, this one is rare, this one I do not want to lose. That is the Machiavellian paradox of attraction. To win, you must be willing to not play. To have her, you must be willing to lose her. To be chosen, you must be the kind of man who does not wait to be chosen, because he has already chosen himself. And that self-selection, that sovereign, unshakable, fiercely protective act of choosing yourself, is not selfish. It is the most generous thing you will ever do. Because the man who has chosen himself is the man who has something real to offer. His love is not a transaction. His attention is not a bribe. His presence is not a plea. Everything he gives from surplus, not from scarcity, and that is the only kind of love that lasts, the only kind that does not suffocate, the only kind that does not turn into resentment when the initial flame fades. Machiavelli spent his life studying the rise and fall of empires, and the pattern was always the same. The empires that fell were the ones that overextended, that gave away too much, that tried to hold territory they did not have the strength to defend. The empires that endured were the ones that knew their borders, guarded their resources, and expanded only when expansion served the greater architecture of their power. Your life is your empire. Your time is your territory. Your energy is your army. Guard them with the same ferocity that a prince guards his kingdom, and watch how the world, and the women in it, begins to treat you differently, not because you demanded it, but because you demonstrated it. Through your silence, through your absence, through your standards, through your composure, through your willingness to lose what you want in order to become who you are meant to be. This is the end of the 5 teachings, but it is not the end of your transformation. In many ways, it is only the beginning, because intellectual understanding is the seed, not the tree. The tree grows through daily practice, through the moments when you are tempted to send that text and you do not, through the mornings when you choose discipline over comfort, through the conversations where you hold your tongue instead of filling the silence, through the relationships where you enforce your standards even when your heart is begging you to compromise. Every one of those moments is a brick in the fortress you are building. And eventually, brick by brick, choice by choice, the fortress becomes so strong that nothing, no rejection, no disappointment, no woman's indifference can breach it. You will be tested, that is certain. The old patterns will call you back like sirens calling a sailor to the rocks. You will meet a woman who makes you forget everything you learned tonight. You will feel the pull toward the old behaviors, the eagerness, the availability, the emotional flooding. And in that moment, you will have a choice. Return to the man you were, or stand as the man you have become. Choose wisely. Because Machiavelli was right about one more thing. Fortune favors those who are prepared, and those who act with decisiveness when the moment of truth arrives. Your moment of truth is not here, in this video. It is out there, in the next conversation, the next date, the next silence that stretches between you and a woman who is watching to see what kind of man you are. Let her see the truth. I want to leave you with one more thing before we close this chapter, a story that Machiavelli would have appreciated, though it comes from a time after his own. There was a king, not a loud king, not a celebrated one, who ruled a small territory surrounded by enemies far more powerful than he was. His advisors told him to form alliances, to marry for strategic gain, to bend the knee to a stronger neighbor and secure protection through submission. The king listened. He nodded. And then he did none of those things. Instead, he fortified his walls. He trained his soldiers not to be the largest army, but the most disciplined. He invested in his people, not through generosity that would bankrupt him, but through the kind of measured strategic investment that built loyalty deeper than any bribe could buy. And when the larger kingdoms came, as they inevitably did, they found not a weak king begging for mercy, but a fortress that was not worth the cost of conquering. And so they moved on. They conquered easier targets, kingdoms that had tried to please everyone, kingdoms that had no walls because they trusted in the goodwill of their neighbors, kingdoms that had given away their strength in the hope that weakness would be rewarded with kindness. That king is you. Or rather, he is the man you are in the process of becoming. Your fortress is your self-respect. Your disciplined soldiers are your habits, the daily practices of silence, of standard keeping, of emotional control, of knowing when to be present and when to withdraw. Your walls are your boundaries. And the enemies at your gates are not women. They are the old impulses, the old patterns, the old versions of yourself that want to tear down what you are building, because building is hard and destruction is easy. Do not let them in. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever again. There is a specific kind of loneliness that accompanies the early stages of this transformation, and I want to address it directly, because if I do not, it could become the crack through which the old man returns. When you first start living by these teachings, you will lose people, not because you have become cruel, but because you have become selective. The women who were only interested in the version of you that was available and accommodating, they will drift away when that version disappears. The friends who benefited from your people-pleasing tendencies will feel the shift and may not like what they feel. The world around you will push back against the change because the world is comfortable with the old you. The old you was predictable. The old you was manageable. The old you was safe. The new you is none of those things. The new you is a disruption, and disruptions, by definition, are uncomfortable for everyone except the one causing them. Embrace that discomfort. Sit in it. Let it burn away the last remnants of the man who needed approval more than he needed self-respect. Because on the other side of that discomfort is something that no amount of external validation could ever provide. The deep, quiet, unshakable knowledge that you are enough. Not because a woman told you, not because the world validated you, but because you decided it. And a man who has decided his own worth is a man who the world eventually agrees with. Because conviction, genuine conviction, is the most persuasive force in existence. Women will sense this shift. They will not be able to explain it. They will not point to your clothes or your body or your bank account and say that is why he is different. They will simply feel it. In the way you hold eye contact a beat longer than most men dare. In the way you pause before answering a question as if your words actually matter. In the way you do not fill every silence with nervous chatter. In the way you carry yourself as though you are walking towards something rather than running from something. These are subtle signals, invisible to the untrained eye. But to a woman who is paying attention, who is looking for a man of substance in a world drowning in noise, these signals are louder than a scream. And here is something that will surprise you. The women who are attracted to this new version of you will be different from the women who were attracted to the old version. They will be stronger, more independent, more challenging, more real. Because like attracts like. A man of depth attracts women of depth. A man of standards attracts women who have their own. A man who does not need validation attracts women who do not trade in it. The quality of your romantic life will rise in direct proportion to the quality of your relationship with yourself. This is not a platitude. This is a law. And Machiavelli, who spent his entire career observing the relationship between internal strength and external outcomes, would have confirmed it without hesitation. Now, if this message has reached you, not just your ears but somewhere deeper, somewhere that does not have a name, I want you to do something. Scroll down to the comments and write these words. I am the man who walks away and the world follows. This is not a comment. This is a declaration, a line drawn in the sand between who you were and who you are choosing to be. When you write those words, you are not performing for an audience. You are making a silent pact with yourself. A pact that says, I heard this, I absorbed this, and I will never go back to the man who chased what should have come to him. And if you are ready to continue this journey, if you want to go deeper into the philosophy of power, the psychology of attraction, the architecture of an unshakable life, then subscribe to this channel. Not because I am asking, because subscribing is not about me. It is about you. It is about building a fortress around your transformation, a place you can return to when the world tries to pull you back into the patterns you are leaving behind, a space where the teachings continue, where the weapons are sharpened, where the man you are becoming finds the fuel to keep becoming. This channel is not entertainment. It is architecture. Every video is a brick. And the man who builds brick by brick, day by day, teaching by teaching, that man does not need luck. He does not need fortune. He does not need a woman to complete him, because he has completed himself. And the world, every corner of it, every relationship, every room he enters, responds accordingly. Go now. Walk differently tonight. Speak less. Observe more. Hold your ground when the old impulses rise. Let your silence carry the weight of everything you have learned. Let your absence be the most powerful thing you have ever said. And when the moment comes, the moment when she looks at you and you can feel her trying to understand why you are different from every man she has ever known, do not explain it. Let her wonder. Because a man who can be fully understood is a man who can be fully dismissed. And you, the Machiavellian man, the sovereign, the one who chose himself before anyone else could, you are not dismissible. Not anymore. Not ever again. Go now, and let your silence be your crown, not your cage. Let your standards be your armor, not your prison. Let your willingness to walk away be the bridge that leads you to everything you deserve. Machiavelli lit the torch 500 years ago. You are carrying it now. Do not let it go out. This is not goodbye. This is the beginning.